right, and welcome everybody. My name is Byron Jamal. So glad to have you as a part of this show today. I am really excited. I have two phenomenal people coming on to talk about love and success. Really, this has been such an important topic to discuss, especially as we engage around the holidays. You know, there are so many crazy things coming up. Well, there's already crazy things happening in the world, but even more happen during the holidays. I'm telling you, there's more depression, there's more anxiety, there's more stress. And this is the kind of talk that we need in order to really dive deep and engage on a level of what love looks like during the holidays. So we're going to kind of guide the conversation a little bit more generally, but definitely as we talk about what the holidays are giving, we'll be talking about love and having successful relationships, dating, even your single life during the holidays. So first up, I have the amazing Jordan Green. She is a therapist and just all around great person. Her Instagram page does amazing numbers on a daily basis. It's because what she gives is so pure and just direct. She just loves to give out the wisdom that she has learned from her education. But I want to bring her in so she can tell you more about what she does and how she does it. Jordan, welcome in. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you on today. I follow your stuff, and I'm just glad that you took some time out to talk with us about love. Tell everybody about what you do and how you got started.
Yeah, so I am a licensed therapist and a coach. I went to grad school to get my master's in social work and have been doing individual and couples and families therapy ever since then. I've been working for a small company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, doing therapy. And in this last year, I've branched out a little bit and started my own coaching business. And I have a lot of fun projects that I'm working on. And so I joined Instagram about a year ago, and it's been such a fun creative outlet for me to create content and just share what I know with the world. I started to feel I love doing the one-on-one therapy and the one-on-one coaching, but I started to feel at one point like all of this knowledge from all of my education and years of helping people could help so many more people. Yes. And so that's what led me to join Instagram and start sharing on there. And then all of the positive feedback I was getting just encouraged me to share more. And so that's how I got here. That's how I'm.
Well, I love it. It actually is really good. You do a great job with your presentations of those thoughts. And I get it because as a coach as well, somebody who coaches people one-on-one pretty much for a living, I understand that itch in you that starts rising up when you realize that there are more people that could be reached within the hour that you may sit with them. And so creating that content that can reach out across the aisle and touch different people, which it has. So congratulations on that. What has been a big focus for you this year with all the things going on? What has been a sort of central theme for you this year?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. So each year, instead of doing New Year's resolutions, I pick a theme for the year. And it's just a word that I'm going to focus on. And this year the word was flow. And I've realized that I really had to learn to be flexible because any plans that I thought I had just totally fell to the wayside. And I'm focusing on just infusing everything that I do with love. Trying to approach everything with love and with patience and acceptance and a willingness to be flexible, because I don't think it's been an easy year for anyone this year.
At all, right? Like at all. But that's a great thing. Actually, I do something similar. My word for the year was alignment. And so it was about being able to be aligned and know what alignment feels like. I found the analogy when I was really in prayer about that. From a person running with a kite and trying to take the kite higher. And they were using all of their energy because there was no wind. And so even though they accomplished their task, the kite went higher, they got fatigued. And so they ended up being short-sighted and ending their process much sooner than the person who conversely is waiting until the wind is blowing and is able to stand still and have the kite go even higher. doing less work and getting a better result. And that to me is the real picture of what alignment looks like. And so that was my image for this year, to really be aligned with everything, making sure I wasn't trying to rush things. Even projects I wanted to get out, I was like, is this the right timing? Is the wind blowing? Well, a lot of people in their relationships, and you deal with this, a lot of people in their relationships, people want to rush into things. For you, what wisdom have you given to people in counseling and coaching sessions about slowing down potentially and waiting for someone?
Yeah, it's so we live in an instant gratification culture and an instant gratification world, right? Where we expect everything to just be at our fingertips and to be able to get all the answers we want right now. And it can be tough to slow down. Slow down. Acceptance is an incredible practice. Mindfulness is an incredible practice. The more that we can slow down and get present, because usually when we're rushing into things, it's because there's some sort of future outcome that we think is going to make us happy. It's, attractive. We're desiring it in some way. And so we get locked into this. If this happens, when this happens, then I'll be happy, or then I'll feel satisfied, or then I'll feel like I've succeeded in life. And so really catching that if, when, then thinking and getting present, becoming mindful of, of where we are right now, acceptance of where we are right now. And I think we rush into things because we feel like it's going to make us happy. But if we can kind of return to where we are right now and remember that we can be happy right now, we can be at peace right now, we can feel love right now. And so getting present is a really incredible practice. And it's still fun to work towards our goals, but when we can slow down and enjoy the process more, we realize that the journey is where a lot of the growth is. And the destination's fun too, but it's the process.
That is so good. And, I have to agree with you wholeheartedly. I tell my clients it really is a love journey. And that while the destination is important in many ways to you, you will spend more time on the journey than at the destination. In many cases, right? Like you spend more time single in your life than many people spend, especially nowadays, in one relationship. So being able to enjoy the process of becoming and getting to know each other, and not rushing it, really enjoying it, really being able to prioritize life sometimes and say, you know what, this goal is great, but I understand that everything that I choose has some sort of limitation to it. And so if I choose to, let's say, have kids, I know that's going to take time from other things that I may be able to accomplish. That's just the give and take of life, and being okay with that, to say, hey, I want to do a little more self-care. That's going to take away from me staying up all night for 5 days a week, trying to knock out these things, and really be okay with that. How does someone get okay with that? How does someone get to a point where they are okay with saying that the accomplishment is not as much as the overall enjoyment and fulfillment in life?
Well, I think we kind of get there. We all get there in our own way, right? I think sometimes it's once we get to that destination, we think we realize it's like, is it really all that it was, that we made it up to be? And I realized that when it was like middle school led to high school, led to college, and I finished my undergrad, and then I was like, now what? Right? Like the whole time I thought I was like doing, the next thing so that I could get to where I thought I wanted to go. And then I got there and I was like, well, why wasn't I enjoying this journey more? Because now that I'm here, like I still feel like there's always going to be something that's next. And so I think, that just keeping that perspective, that bigger picture perspective of there's always going to be a next thing. There's always going to be something more to work towards. And for me, that was the huge realization that allowed me to slow down more and really appreciate the journey.
Wow. What are some of the big things that you're working on right now when it comes to helping people?
Well, I am working on some really fun projects. I am creating a planner. I am an organization person. I love to stay organized. I love planners, and it's not, I was hoping to have it launched by now, but it'll probably be a few more weeks. But I'm working on a fun planner that will help people to stay organized, help them, well, it'll have a habit tracker and all kinds of fun little self-care tips and practices in there. And so I'm excited about that. I'm also working on this is the first time I've talked about in either of these projects publicly. So,
I love it.
Now seeing them here.
Inside scoop, y'all. Inside scoop.
I'm also working on somewhat of a support group that I'll be launching at the end of this month. And yeah, it'll be a really cool, fun group that will help people to accomplish their goals and change the habits that they're wanting to change. So a lot of people do New Year's resolutions this time of year. And so I always set New Year's resolutions and never succeeded in following through. And so I'm hoping to help people with that, whether it's putting things into perspective a little bit more, or setting more realistic goals, or realizing that sometimes it's better to set short-term goals than those long-term goals, but hoping to create a support group for people, because I think community is so important. And that's one of the things I've loved most about Instagram is the community. And so I'd love to be able to connect with my followers and just this community at large in a more intimate way.
That's awesome. And that's so healthy. I think people are looking for that more as well. People are looking for those safe spaces to engage, to share, and to release a lot of those things. Now, you mentioned earlier the habit tracker. A lot of people do have habits, especially why they create New Year's resolutions, because they have habits that they feel are self-defeating or simply just not advantageous to what they want to accomplish in their life.
Yeah.
What are some best practices, if you could give one or two tips that someone who has a bad habit, especially when it comes to relationships, and we'll dive into that a little bit more, but what are one or two things that you could recommend to someone to break a habit?
Well, so with bad habits, we label them bad habits, or maybe they're like certain self-destructive tendencies that we have. But I always want people to realize that they serve a function. They're serving a role and a purpose in your life, and that's why you're doing it, right? So it can help to have some self-compassion when it comes to that, because we tend to be really critical of ourselves when there are certain bad habits that we're engaging in. Or habits that we feel aren't serving us. And so having more self-compassion, realizing that most of them are trying to help us in some way, whether it's like a lot of people bite their nails. And that can be a way to self-soothe. It can be a way that we are, something that we're using to try to regulate our nervous system. And so having more self-compassion when we're engaging in those habits, and more understanding of why we do that. And then creating new habits. I always encourage people to, rather than focusing on what you're trying to get rid of, like try to focus on what you're wanting to bring into your life, what new habits you're trying to create. Because it's kind of like when you say, don't think about apples, then like that's all you can think about. If you're like, don't do that thing, you're going to want to do it probably even more. Don't eat that thing. Like you're going to crave it for the next 3 weeks. you tell yourself you can't have it. And so I like to think of kind of pruning them away by just not giving them so much attention and focusing on the new habits that you're wanting to create. And there are lots of little tips to help with that, whether it's pairing a habit with things that you're example. We brush our teeth every day. Many of us have certain things that we do on a daily basis. So if we can pair a habit that we're trying to create with a habit that already exists, it'll be a reminder, and it'll help us to remember to engage in that new habit if we're trying to create a new one. But starting small is also so important, because a lot of times we try to start so big, or we're like, I'm going to change these 3 things all at once. And and that's not going to work. The small steps build our self-trust. Most of the time when we've had habits and we've tried to break them and it hasn't worked, it hurts our self-trust. We lose confidence in ourselves and our ability to change. And so starting really small and small baby steps. And then when one thing gets easy, you can add something else that you're wanting to change.
That's so good. I agree with you wholeheartedly here, because a lot of people do try to bite the entire apple in one bite, core and all, right? Like try to just, I want to be healthy, so entire apple. But instead, it starts with the smaller bites that entirely allow the person, through the course of practicing eating a fresh apple, getting the taste for it, allowing the taste buds to adapt to it. There's I think helping people realize that there is a gift to the process, that actually doing each step, the small steps, there's a
Yeah.
purpose to that. And just trying to rush through it and do it, just trying to get through the one workout, just trying to, none of that is really advantageous, because you're not developing, like you mentioned earlier, the habit. I like what you said also about pairing it with something that you already do. So like I tell my clients a lot of times, have the affirmations in the mirror. So when you're getting ready, you're able to, you're already going to the mirror, you better, to get yourself together for the day. And so adding that to make it a part of what you now do, so it becomes a part of your actual nature. Well, I am so glad that we had some time to get going here. We also have an opportunity to bring in a counterpart for you in the field, Miss Esther Boykin, who does some amazing work both on TV and in her own practice. I'll bring her in so she can tell us a little bit more about what she does. And Esther, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I am good. I feel like I got here right on time for the conversation, talking a little bit about self-compassion. I hate to be running late for things or having, kind of like the wrong time on my calendar. So it's good to be here. As you said, I'm Esther Boykin. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I run a practice, a group practice with several associates in the DC area, and just kind of do all kinds of things, relationship therapy related, in lots of different venues. So.
Well, thank you for being on. Look, I want to make sure I soak up all of the wisdom I have here between these two amazing ladies. So I'm going to get a little heavier now that we got Esther on, because I was going nice with Jordan, because this on the heart on the heart we go in. So we're going to make sure to talk real good today, okay? For both of you, it's been COVID season. So how is love, number one? So it's two parts. Number one, how have you coached people about love and relationships during COVID, but also how has it impacted your personal life? So both how you've helped and also how it's impacted you. Esther, since you're joining us, go ahead.
Joining us, I get to go first. Okay, all right. Let's see. Well, you know what? I'll start personally, because I also try to do that with my work, right? Like, it's important to make sure that I'm practicing some of what I preach. So for me personally, I really feel like this has been a time for me to reflect and kind of refine, like, what is it that I really need most in terms of relationship and connection, right? I'm definitely an extrovert. I definitely am very passionate about work. I spend a lot of time engaged with people. I like to be out and social. And really what COVID has given me is an opportunity to recognize how much downtime I actually need, right? Like how much time I need to be by myself. As much as I love being connected to people and spending time and engaging in conversation and doing all of those things, I actually need far more alone time than I thought that I ever did. And also more intimate connection. I'm definitely a small group person, which I knew, but COVID's really given me the opportunity to go like, oh, I like having one or two people, right? Like all of my sort of like massive Facebook groups and like all of the things that I used to kind of pour some time into that were large groups of people have really fallen back as I've been more conscientious about where I put my energy, because when we're under a lot of stress, and this kind of gets into some of the things I've talked to clients about, is when we're not designed, we're not wired for acute stress and trauma in an ongoing way. Like as human beings, we're just not designed for that. And a lot of what this year has been sort of this sense of stress and trauma that doesn't seem to have an end in sight, right? Like we're trying to adjust to something that we're very uncertain about. And that takes a lot of emotional energy. And so I think it's been a lot of recognizing that it's great that you have all this time to maybe be with people that you love, and it may seem like you're not doing things. I'm not going to my office anymore, schools, for a while there, schools closed. I'm not going to happy hour. I'm not doing all of these external extracurriculars.
Take my happy hour.
I know, it's really hard. It's really hard on me. But And so it's easy to sort of talk with ourselves, as Jordan talked about, being more self-compassionate and thinking, well, I'm not doing so much, right? Like if we're not physically doing, I should have more energy for my partner. I should have more to give to my dating life. I should be doing more engaged. And the reality is we have to give ourselves a lot more compassion around being in a chronic state of stress, as many of us have been this year, really does take a lot of emotional energy. And that means that while you may not physically be doing more, the emotional capacity you have to give to others, particularly others who are, you feel really close to, is actually less than probably it was a year ago when you had 11 things on your social calendar all the time. But your emotional capacity was very different. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that in ourselves and acknowledge that that's happening for our partners as well. So that we can grant them a lot of grace. We can recognize like, oh, you need time to recharge, even though it looks like all you did today was sit on the couch or in front of your computer or, whatever it is that we're kind of experiencing.
That's good. Thank you for that. That's realizing that you don't necessarily have the emotional capacity that you thought you had. I agree. When I was out doing events and having, red carpets and going to different venues and premieres, I mean, you get in such a flow that you learn how to manage your energy and your period, right? And so when you're not in that, you really have to redistribute it in different ways. And if you haven't had to sit for a while and have nothing but the work in front of you, then it is a different experience and you feel a bit of grief. A lot of my clients have felt grief about the loss of their former lives, the going out. It's trauma, but I really like the word grief because that's exactly what people have felt depressed and have lost much of their own sense of identity in this time, because for many of the people in those large groups, that's where they thrived. They thrived on those networks and in those places where they could bounce back and forth amongst different people and network. And so who are you when you can't do that, right? Jordan, what do you think? How's it affected you? COVID affected you and affected how you speak to your clients, your patients about COVID and relationships?
Yeah, I really resonate with what you were saying about grief. I think a lot of my clients, and myself included, have experienced grief about changes, right? We can experience grief anytime there is a change in our lives, even if it seems like it's a good change, like a new job or more time with our family. There's grief that comes with any big change in life. And this has been a huge change for a lot of us. For me, I was actually planning to travel all year. So in January, I put my entire house in storage and gave up our lease and took off to travel, and then ended up having to come back home in March and lived with my parents for a little bit because I thought this will pass and then I'll be able to travel again. And then I realized it wasn't going to pass. And so this year has looked nothing like what I thought it would. And there was some grief in that, but there was also, like I mentioned earlier, my word for the year is flow. And so I just really had to learn to be flexible and accept the changes and to flow with it. And I think working on acceptance and, like we talked about before, mindfulness and getting present and remembering how much I have to be grateful for right now has really helped me through that. And so there was a little bit of a course direction. I ended up buying a house, and a lot of good has come out of this year, but it hasn't looked anything like I thought it would. And I think that's true for a lot of people, just like anyone thought it would. I've noticed with my clients and relationships in particular, a lot of people are struggling because they're either quarantined and stuck at home with their partners and their families who they're used to having a little bit more space from. And so that causes its own host of challenges and difficulties. And then on the other hand, there are people who are separated from loved ones, maybe because borders are closed or, for other reasons. We're just not able to see people as much as we would like to. And especially for those who are separated from a significant other, it's really hard for them. And so kind of on both ends of the spectrum, they're really challenging situations that come with their own host of challenges and difficulties. And so really helping people to work through that with love. And like you said, Esther, just having more compassion for each other, recognizing that we're all, perhaps struggling a little bit more this year in our own ways, and having compassion for people and a little bit more patience.
I agree. I'm loving this thought here of compassion. That is beautiful. And being able to have that grace, as Esther mentioned, being able to have that grace, being able to have that compassion, especially when you had those plans. You put up your whole house. Good Lord.
Yeah, I really thought I was like planning until like January through December. I was planning to travel. I had money for like 2 years for it, but like I said, it's okay because there was a little bit of a redirection, but I was able to spend that money for a down payment on a house, and so it looked different than I thought it would, but it comes with its own blessings.
There you go. Everything does happen for its intended purpose. But it still doesn't always feel good.
Exactly. I think that's such an important part, is like giving ourselves space for, I love that you use the word grief, because I think that's so spot on. It's like, we need to grieve those things, even when it works out. Like even eventually you sort of go like, oh, okay, we found a different path that was so fulfilling, but we still got to have space to like grieve what we planned for, what we hoped for.
Yes. Let me tell you, when we were looking for a home, we had this spot. It was off of a street called Lamont. So we would always just say the house on Lamont, or just short would be Lamont. So we wanted this house. This was the house. It had the unfinished basement, so we could turn it into a space for music therapy and all those kind of things. And then I could do my writing, sound studio, all this stuff. Didn't get the house, right? It got bought before we could get it. And so we're just mad. In Atlanta, there's not a lot of places that have an unfinished basement where you can really build it out the way you want. Strategic things we needed in a home. So we didn't have to buy a separate office space. So we were waiting and waiting. And we just gave up for a little bit. And then something literally came on the radar that we didn't expect. And lo and behold, it's even better than what we had before and cheaper by $100,000. So, there is that, but I have to tell you, even though the blessing came, there was so much grief in that in-between stage of just, we lost the one, we had put a lot of energy. It was like 3 months of energy into where we were going to put stuff in the house. You know how you did, Jordan. Where am I going to put stuff in place? How's it going to look? How am I going to live when I'm doing it? I mean, we're setting out scenarios and playing out scripts and writing them down in tablets of stone, and they haven't materialized yet. And so I understand, and you're right. It does feel like grief in that.
There can also be grief in like the loss of certainty. I noticed that in that time period where I was looking for homes, making offers, and some like you, there were some that I really thought were going to pull through and they didn't. And there was so much like grief that I experienced during that time, just because of the uncertainty of everything. And it was almost like I was grieving this loss of certainty, or like I didn't know where I was going. And that can be really hard to just really like become comfortable in the discomfort of uncertainty.
We might need to put something together just for people who are buying homes and have a whole separate emergency counseling kit for them. So
I think we do. I do want to say, Byron, I think that the story you just told about the house is such a nice metaphor for, I think, what a lot of people also experience in relationships, right? You meet this person and you're like, this is the one. And we've got it, and we're building this future. And whether it's that particular relationship falls apart, or that you and that person just get into a place where it's like, this is not how I thought being together was going to be, right? Like, this is hard.
Talk
and I think so often it's like, well, this feels terrible, so this must not be the right thing. And we love to talk about the story of how like we find the silver lining, or like the blessing eventually comes. And I love that you we ignore the pause, which is like in between the redirect and when we get to the thing we really wanted, or the better version of it, or the new, journey, is a lot of pain and grief. And that pain and grief, whether it's a couple months or a couple years, deserves space to kind of be acknowledged, but it's also not a sign that you're not going to get where you want to get. Like, I am so sure, like, Jordan, I cannot imagine putting my house up in storage and like, I'm sad because I thought I was going to go visit my girlfriend in Germany for like 3 weeks. Like, I'm still trying to get over that trip. So I can't imagine a whole year, right? Like, But when we give ourselves space to grieve the potential, the hopes that we had attached, then we'll give ourselves the space to move through that, to kind of be like, oh, but this could be something. I can still have the thing that I was longing for, whatever that is, that sense of stability or security or freedom, or, you know, that sense of home, all of those kinds of things. We can find it, but we do have to grieve. We have to make space for the pain if we really want to get to the joy. Like they're not, we want them to be separate things, and they're not.
Yeah, it's really tempting just to kind of bypass the grief.
Yeah.
You know, I know I'm very practiced in that. I practiced that most of my life, bypassing those hard emotions and just going right to, okay, what's the lesson here? What, you know, how can I find that sense of home within me? But it's so important to really slow down and acknowledge and express and feel and work through those tough emotions that come up.
I think that's so powerful to really talk about how difficult it can be, even as people who work in the wholeness, mindfulness space. It is what I like to say to myself: it's okay, Byron, to give yourself the gift of being human. To be human is to be human, and it's okay to be human, to have feelings, to have emotions, to have all of the things that pop up in your head that you didn't want to be there. That is that conflicting inner voice. But having the tools and techniques is what helps us, when we really process it, to come back around and get back on track. I know many relationships that during this time, they were struggling because they were in confined spaces with one another, up under each other, with more time than they ever needed. They smelt more of their partner than they ever thought they would. They saw their partner more hours in a day than they ever thought they would. They had more annoyances from their partner than they ever thought they would. For me, one of the things that I counseled was I like to wear hats. So I told my clients in relationships to do the magic hat game. And that just means that when you wear a certain hat, without having to be verbal about, hey, leave me alone, I need my space, that when you put it on, it signals, hey, I just need a little time, right? I'm not even here. In fact, it's an invisibility hat. You don't even see me right now. That's one thing that creatively I try to come up with, so that couples could not annoy or aggravate or irritate one another. What are some other tips that you can, because it looks like we'll still be here for a little while. So what are some other things that you would recommend for couples who are stuck in the house together, working from home like they never had to before? How can they maintain, what steps can they do to maintain a healthier, happier relationship?
I know one thing that's helped some of my couples is, you know, creating a sense of routine throughout your day, because it's tempting when you're at home all day working from home. There doesn't tend to be much structure. We can kind of wake up when we want. A lot of times we work in bed, we work at the table, we work on the couch. And so to have some designated spaces, Esther is a psychologist, and she talks a lot about the importance of space in relationships, because, you know, part of the idea of like needing space is that, you know, in any relationships, there's me and there's you and there's us. And sometimes when we spend so much time with someone, it's almost like our sense of identity and being, like, there's this enmeshment that happens. And we sometimes feel like we start to lose our sense of like personal identity and self. And so it's so important to take that space, and that space is what allows attraction to happen. That space is what allows you to move towards each other. If you're always together, there isn't that space in the relationship to move towards each other, to court each other, to you know, desire and attract. You think of magnets, like there needs to be some space for them to move towards each other. And so creating that time and those spaces for that separation can be really helpful and really important. And I think a lot of people feel guilty doing that sometimes, but recognizing that it's okay and it's normal, and it's healthy to have a little bit of space, and it's okay to ask for it. It's okay to set certain boundaries around your time and your day, but to create some sort of structure of, maybe, you know, I have my me time in the morning, and then I work, and then we have our time in the evening, we connect. And just finding what works for you and creating that structure can help a lot.
That's bravo, because I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. I love the magnet illustration. It made me think that you really don't know the strength of the bond of the magnets until they are separated. When two things are right up under each other, you don't know really the strength of that bond. But it's not until you pull it apart and let it snap back together that you realize, okay, this thing is actually coming together and not pushing apart. So that's actually really, really good. I love that analogy. I love analogies, by the way. I'm a former preacher, so I use those all the time. But so you'll hear that again. Esther, what about for you? How are you coaching people on tools that they can use inside of the home in order to not strangle each other when they are activated?
Well, definitely all the things that Jordan just talked about. I am also an analogy person, as all of my clients will attest to. Some are better than others, but I love a good analogy. I think along the same line, something that I'm actually going to share something that I stole early in the pandemic, in like quarantine. I did a workshop for couples with a good friend of mine who's also a couples therapist, Tracy. And she said something that I have definitely borrowed as my own and have talked to all of my clients about. Because one of the other side components of being together all the time, aside from getting on each other's nerves, is, and as Jordan alluded to, like, sex becomes like that passion, that desire for your partner can, wane. Like if I look at your face every single day for 24 hours a day, and you do all the things that, sometimes you might have had privacy to do, but you don't anymore. Like I definitely have heard from a lot of couples, it's like, what is going on with our sex life? Or just even sort of the passion around it. And so Tracy uses this great, and she's like, everybody needs to have rock star moments, right? Like imagine like that celebrity, that like rock star, that musical artist that you just kind of have that celebrity crush on. Like they always seem, because you see them up on a stage doing this thing in flow, in their passion, really consumed not with you, but with kind of like what they do really well. That's sexy. That creates a lot of desire and interest in another person. And when we're living life day to day, like really in that kind of like mundane routine over and over again, without sort of these breaks to be in other places, right? You don't get to see each other out at happy hour being funny or flirtatious with somebody else or whatever it is that were those moments for you. It's important to kind of stop and say, like, how can I set my partner up for a rock star moment where I see them? And so like I've got couples who have kids, like for, one woman, like she's like, my husband is a nerd and he's so patient. She's like, I want to scream at these kids, trying to help them like homeschool and homework. And I'm so frustrated. And she's like, having him do homework with the kids was so, he's patient and he's loving. And I get to see his kind of like nerdy, he loves like helping them get it. And she's like, it's like the sexiest thing I get to watch. Right. And, I think about like, I like to watch somebody who's cooking for me, right? Like I like you're good at that and you're kind of in your zone figuring that out. So it's important for you to think about like, when does my partner give me those rock star moments? How can I create, going back to sort of the routine, how do I create those moments? And on the flip side, because I think the other piece is when we're struggling with like relationship stuff and our partner's annoying us, we think a lot about what they need to do. We also have to take ownership. And so asking yourself, what makes me feel sexy, attractive, in flow, like just passionate and good about myself? I'm assuming most people are like me, like, listen, I could be in the same, I look good from the shoulders up every day, but I might be in the same sweatpants from Monday through Friday. And so thinking about like, okay, but I feel comfortable, but do I feel attractive? If I'm wearing the same sweatpants on Thursday that I had on Friday and might have slept in on Tuesday, like probably not, right? Like, so it's also taking some ownership about like what makes me feel like an attractive and an engaged partner and actually doing some of those things. And so some of it is like, as Jordan said, like taking the time to yourself, and some of it's other things. Maybe, for some people that's getting yourself together, whether it's like haircuts, trimming your beard, putting on your makeup, whatever it is. For other people, it might just be things that you used to do that don't feel as important anymore. It's taking time for a hobby or a passion that lets you feel good and centered in who you are, because that's what your partner's attracted to, right? Like that central core grounded self. So that's always my tip.
Well, that's good. I think that the topic of sex in relationships, especially in the home, is huge. When a lot of people are dealing with things in their relationships where, like you said, we're not having to go anywhere. We're not going anywhere. Groceries can be made, delivered at the doorstep. I just had some delivered today. So there's really not much need to go out. But to your point, when I did have to go to an event that was a small, intimate gathering, and my partner came, being able to get dressed and look nice, I was like, I know, I remember.
Okay, all right.
I remember. Yes, yeah. So that is important, and I think we do forget that, and I think we often are led to feel we make ourselves feel bad about even having the thought. Oh man, I may not feel as attracted to my partner right now, but you haven't had the chance to see them so relaxed in a long time. Maybe on a 2-week cruise where you were out in the Bahamas or something for 2 weeks, and there was no barber on there or something. I don't know, but that would be the only time, because normally people have other obligations to look good for other people. And so to your point, there wouldn't be that opportunity for you to wear those sweatpants every day most times, right? You'd be out at your office, meet your clients. So no, I thank you for that, because that's big. I just want to say that again, how big that is. I think we understate that so much. So I appreciate you for even sharing that. When it comes to certain thoughts here, I really want to think about starting in COVID. It was a little daunting, and then it became normalized. How do we move in relationships back to a culture that is post-COVID, as we're trying to get our minds prepared for that?
I think slowly and patiently is probably the short answer. I think, COVID happened, and I think for a lot of us, like, it felt like it came out of the blue. And so we do have an opportunity as we kind of move out of this, whatever that looks like, to be a little bit more intentional of really saying, like, I have an opportunity. We all have an opportunity to be more thoughtful about what our relationships mean to us, how we spend our time, how we engage with the world around us, and also to take ownership of what makes you comfortable and what you're not comfortable with. And I think that's something else that I talk a lot with clients and in other sort of settings about, is people feel very differently, right? Like, people feel differently about the vaccine. People feel differently about masks, about what's the right size gathering. Is a gathering at all okay? When will it be okay? And so it's really an opportunity for us to also continue practicing what it looks like to set boundaries. And I think so often we think of boundaries, if you struggle with boundaries, then your experience setting them is often, you're setting them at the point where people have kind of crossed your boundaries because you didn't express them multitudes of times. And it can feel conflictual or confrontational or really difficult. And sometimes it's just going to be that. But I think I really go back to this idea that boundaries are an invitation for us to figure out, how do I love myself and also love other people, right? How can I respect and honor what feels safe and comfortable and right for me, while also respecting that maybe look different for other people. And so we may need to compromise and find a middle ground. And I think that's going to be true in all the relationships and in all the ways that we move back to being out in the world again, is sort of recognizing, like, I have to honor other people and their comfort levels. And I also have to be clear about what mine are so that I can express them clearly and lovingly. It's not an ultimatum. It's really just saying, like, hey, this is where I am right now with life in this sort of post-COVID space. Where are you? What makes you comfortable? What makes me comfortable? And, I have friends, we only see each other masked, 6 feet apart, outside in the cold. And I live in DC and it's cold. I'm okay doing that because that's the relation, that's what we need to do to feel good. And I have other friends where we do different things. And there's other people where you need to be tested, or, we have to, I think this is just such a wonderful opportunity for a lot of us who haven't thought about what our boundaries are, and recognizing that you always have boundaries. The only thing that changes is whether you choose to communicate them or not.
That's
they always exist. And so this is a good time to do that.
I love what you're saying about that. And something else, you know, to add to that, our boundaries will probably be changing quite a bit. Yeah. You know, my boundary right now may be different than my boundary in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks or in 3 months or 6 months. And so having that curiosity for others, you know, always questioning, always asking, you know, how are you doing? What are your boundaries? What are you comfortable with? And it can be hard with a partner, because I think a lot of times right now, some people, like you said, mentioned Esther, people are approaching this differently. You may have a couple and one person really wants to stay quarantined and that makes them feel safe. The other is really ready to go out and socialize, and that partner feels like the other one is restricting their freedom, and the other one feels like, you know, they're putting them in danger. And it's just, there can be so many differences. And if we can remember that foundation of respect, of love, of care, of really getting curious about what's going on in their internal world. What matters to them? What are their fears? How can we work together as a team to come up with boundaries as a couple that work for us? Because we have our individual boundaries, and as couples, you know, oftentimes we have our boundaries as a couple, you know, when we're going out into the world and we're making decisions that affect the other partner, and you know, figuring out how can we come to those compromises. Can I give a little bit here? Can you give a little bit here? Do I need to come all the way in this situation? And just remembering to stay curious, to stay open, to stay loving, and to stay patient, I think will be really important as we all learn how to navigate this.
I love that. Both of you, just brilliant advice. Hopefully everyone listening takes notes, because you'll be needing those sooner, hopefully sooner than later. You all have also offered us a lot of wisdom when it comes to relationships and dating and all these things around love. And so you've done great for the guests to know more about what they should do. For just a moment, I want them to get to know you a little bit better. So I have a lightning round, a series of questions for you, each of you. You'll both answer, so whoever wants to go first. And you're only giving 1 or 2 sentences. That's it. So no long explanations. You ready for this? All right. We're going to start with you, Jordan. I feel the presence of love when?
I am at home in nature.
Awesome. What about for you, Esther? I feel the presence of love when?
I am with people.
Yeah, me too. I love nature, though. I think I'm a half and halfer. Like when it's cold, that's why I had to move from DC, because when it's cold, nature and I don't even know what nature is.
That's what house plants are for. You just get some house plants to be fine.
I know the nature's grain bars. That's all I know for nature when it's cold. The purpose of forgiveness is, Esther?
To live in alignment with yourself.
Good. What about Jordan?
The word that came to me is relief, to relieve myself of that which is not allowing me to be at peace and move forward.
You see this? These are good. I'm loving this. I am living my purpose when, Jordan?
When I am happy and loving and kind and patient and really allowing myself to express authentically.
Are you reading my wall? Okay.
No. Maybe it's like in my subconscious. Maybe my subconscious has noticed some of those words.
I love that. What about you, Esther? I am living in my purpose when?
I am making space for other people and myself to be fully authentic.
Yes. What is the most difficult decision you've had to make for your purpose, Jordan?
That's a tough one for me. I think letting go of others' expectations, the decision to disappoint others, if that's what I feel is in alignment for me in order for me to follow my purpose.
All right, Esther.
I like that. That is a tough question.
Biggest, most difficult decision. to fulfill your purpose.
To let go of a relationship that did not allow me to have my voice.
Yes. Power. Snaps on both of those. What's the word that would describe why you are here? Esther.
Love.
Jordan.
Compassion came to me.
Awesome. I love this. And last one, what is the reason we need to trust? Jordan.
Alignment, to be in alignment and to be able to fulfill, like feel fulfillment within ourselves and fulfill connection with others.
Esther?
I think the word that came to me was freedom. I think when we trust, we become free to be ourselves, free to love other people, free to discover our purpose in the world.
This was beautiful. Thank you so much, Jordan and Esther. Jordan, please tell the good people where they can find you. And since you told us all the great things you have coming up, 2 new projects, you can tell them again if you want, but if you want to wait, that's fine. Go ahead and tell them where they can find you and what you're doing.
You can find me on Instagram at the.love.therapist. And my website is jordanandrea.com. I'm currently in the process of building a new website. So you can see my existing one, but there will be a new one coming soon with lots of new fun stuff on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Esther, tell the good people where they can find you and what you got coming up.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram and really all the social medias, everything at Esther B NFT. You can also, if you're interested in therapy, you can find my therapy practice, grouptherapyassociates.com. Probably the easiest place to find all the things is therapyisnotadirtyword.com. We've got cute hoodies and other stuff. And in the new year, I've got a coaching program coming up for therapists. So if there are any therapists watching who are interested in kind of building your practice, finding your purpose, called The Business of Therapy. And I will also have a group coming up in 2021 that is in January for Black women who want to work on finding their voice and developing healthier relationship habits and all of those things. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Esther, Jordan, you both were phenomenal today. Thank you for your energy, your wisdom, your positivity, your insight. And I look forward to all the great things you have coming up. I'll continue following your journey and your path. And I'm praying for great continued love and success in your lives. And to everybody watching today, thank you for tuning in to The Heart. We look forward to having more engaging conversations. You can find me, your love and success coach, at byronjamal.com and at byronjamal on all major social media platforms. Again, have a beautiful night. And remember to seek higher love because you are worth the love you seek. Have a beautiful night, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.